We've had a few days to digest the pension reforms in the budget announcement. What is your initial response?
Well, it was certainly unexpected, that was for sure, and I think it caught a number of us by surprise. I think on the one hand, it's part of the government's concerns about the future of the annuities market, and there's certainly concerns that we share and that we've been really pushing for government and regulatory action on. But I think taking a step back, if we think about auto-enrolment and the fantastic work that's going on there, we might see this as a continuation of that policy, and that if people have got more freedom to do what they want with their pension money at the end, it might actually encourage them to save more at the start of the process. And it might also help to really encourage confidence and trust in pensions, and of course we know that that's been really missing from pensions over the last few years. So again, all of that could be very positive news indeed.
But do you think there are areas that perhaps still require further clarification?
I think as we've been looking at the detail of the consultation exercise, as we've been looking at the detail of the budget, there are some areas where we do need some further answers. We need further answers on the issues of guidance. We need further issues around some of the modelling that underpins the Treasury's announcement so that we can really understand what the implications of that will mean. We really need to think about what this means for defined benefit pension schemes. At the moment, the Treasury is saying they might extend this to defined benefit pension schemes. If they do, we need to know what that means. If they do, we need to think about what the macroeconomic consequences of doing that would be. We need to think about what some of the tax implications would be for people who do take that advice, and the means-tested benefits implications, and to think about what some of the practical implications are for defined contribution schemes and issues around their default options, default investment options, for example.
Let's look at the particular issues in turn. Turning first to the issue of guidance. What has the government outlined so far?
Well, so far the government said it's got to be impartial, it's got to be offered face-to-face, not necessarily taken face-to-face, but offered face-to-face through providers and trustees in trust-based DC pension schemes, good quality and free to the consumer. So that much we do know. There's an awful lot, of course, that we don't know. The other thing, of course, we do know is that it's got to be up and running and be able to be offered by next April. So a huge amount of work for us to do with the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, with the pensions regulator, and with government to really flesh out what that means, so that when trustees are required to provide a guidance guarantee, they have some certainty about what it is they're providing, who's going to provide it, and how it's going to be provided.
You mentioned the NAPF had some questions about the modelling that underpins the government plans. What are these questions?
Well, I think we really need to know, the government said that this will net 1.2 billion by 2018-2019. What we'd like to know, so that we can really start to get underneath the proposals, is how much of that is made up by people drawing down money earlier, how much of that is made up by people, for example, paying tax earlier or paying tax when they might not have otherwise paid tax. And we also really need to start to understand some of the macroeconomic assumptions about what would happen if this was extended to defined benefit pension schemes. What will be the knock-on consequences to the gilts market? What might be the appetite for infrastructure, for example, one of the areas that we at the NAPF have been working on very hard. What might be the appetite for those sorts of illiquid assets if defined benefit pension schemes were also included in this, and pension schemes, in defined benefit pension schemes, suddenly saw their members exiting and converting their DB pots into DC pots. And of course, as part of that too, what are the implications for pension schemes' funding position? So we need to know some of the underlying modelling so that we can then work with members to really find some answers to some of those solutions, because Treasury have sought our help in finding the answers to some of those issues.
Do international models such as Australia and the US have something to tell us about how people might react?
Well, I think there are some quite useful things that we can learn from Australia, where there is no requirement to buy an annuity, where, again, some of the messages coming out are quite mixed. We see, some people do take the money at once, some people, do, I'm not quite sure they're buying Lamborghinis, but some people do take the money all at once, but others are starting to make some long-term financial planning. But I think the other thing we can learn from those countries is what the guidance that sits around that really looks like and how that's delivered, because that will be critical to making sure that people can make sensible decisions and long-term decisions when they're faced with retiring.
And do you really think that people are going to blow their pot in one go?
I think people are, generally speaking, pretty sensible, and I don't think people will blow their money all in one go. But of course, people will need a lot of help and support in making sure that they can plan for retirement, which is going to last for 20 or 30 years in many cases. And we know, when we ran our last workplace pensions survey back in October, a survey of 2,000 people, about half of them said to us, I don't feel capable myself of being able to make those decisions. So it comes back to that guidance route. Of course, again, we know that lots of people underestimate how long they're likely to live for. So again, the guidance that's going to sit around this is going to be absolutely critical. And that's why we need to work with government, we need to work with the Financial Conduct Authority to really map out what is going to be in that guidance, how it's going to be delivered.
So turning to the issue of means testing, how likely do we think it is that people might fall back on means testing if they do spend their pension pot all in one go?
Well, of course, we're introducing the single tier state pension, and that's been something which the NAPF has been enormously supportive of. And one of the reasons we've supported it is because it does reduce reliance by pensioners on means tested benefits. Of course, so there's quite a long phase-in period before the single tier comes in fully. So by 2020, about 90% of people will get their full single tier state pension. So again, one of the things we need to talk to government about is what are the transitional arrangements, and to really make sure that, as part of that guidance piece, people understand and people are told about what the implications might be of making different decisions. And part of that might be about taking an annuity, part of that might be about drawing down some or all of the money, part of it might be taking more of their money as cash, but thinking about what the interaction is with means tested benefits.
So thinking more specifically about your DC members, what are the key issues of concern for them?
I think one of the things that we need to do is just to really gather our members' views on this. So we'll certainly, through Policy Watch and through our website and through other channels, be really seeking members' views on this. But I think the immediate issue that seems to be coming through in the discussions that I've had with members is around the guidance service. Those people running trust-based DC schemes will have to provide this guidance guarantee. They're going to need to start to think about what that means, how that's going to be provided. And of course, there are the transitional arrangements too, which come in from the 27th of March. And again, I'm sure that schemes will be asked by scheme members what that means for them. So I think there's quite a lot for DC schemes to be working on. What's really important is that we get feedback from members so that we can feed that back to Treasury, so that we can really make sure that these proposals, which are coming in a very, very short space of time, are workable and can work not just for our pension fund members, but for their scheme members too.
At a first glance, the reforms seem to have limited impact on DB schemes. Is that right?
I think the impact on DB schemes is something which has still got to be assessed. The Treasury starting point is not to extend this provision to DB schemes. So the starting point in the Treasury's consultation document is to say the right at the moment for people to transfer from DB to DC will end. On the other hand, the Treasury is saying, well, we could create a level playing field and say, well, if we trust people in DC to be able to manage their money, we should trust people in DB to be able to do it too. And so therefore, everybody should have the right to transfer from DB to DC. At the moment, of course, very few people do that. With this new right to take 100% as cash, many more people might want to do that. And there are a range of options in between that the Treasury sets out, including being able to just ring fence some of the money or being able to transfer some or all of the money. And at first glance, that looks quite complex for schemes to be able to administer. So again, we need to sit down with schemes. We need to think through the practical consequences of what that would mean. We need to really work out some of the behavioural aspects of what that could mean. Might many more people transfer out of DB? And then we need to think about some of the financial aspects of that. What that would mean for schemes' funding positions, what that might mean for demand for gilts and long-term assets like illiquid assets like infrastructure. And I know that's something that's worrying the government at the moment, who's going to be available to buy gilts and invest in the nation's infrastructure. To really think through all of those consequences. So the starting position the Treasury has is it won't affect DB in the private sector. They've already ruled out the public sector from being included in these proposals. But we really need to think that out, and that's one of the big questions in the consultation exercise, and again, something we'll be working on with the Defined Benefit Council, but also with all our DB members.
And to wrap up, any final thoughts?
I think the final thought is there's a huge amount of work for us to do with our members to make sure that these proposals can be delivered by next April in a way that works for schemes and in a way that works for scheme members. And I think the crucial test is going to be the guidance service, the guidance guarantee that's going to be set up. So we're now working very closely with the Treasury, we're working closely with the Department for Work and Pensions and with the regulators to make sure that the proposals are workable. What's really critical is that we get feedback from members to really think about what this means for their schemes, what this means for your scheme, as well as your thoughts on how this proposal can be made to work.